It's 1 GMT. Hello, I'm Susanna Streeter and this is Business Matters on the BBC World Service. Songs by Rihanna and Bruno Mars. More people illegally downloaded their tracks than those of any other artist last year. It's something the record companies are desperate to try and prevent, or at least control, but music piracy seems to elude their grasp. Well, Musicmetric collects and analyses data for the entertainment industry, and its chairman is Jeremy Silver. He told me that there are, in fact, ways in which music piracy can be useful.
One of the things that makes the data that we gather interesting is the fact that we can actually see which cities, which countries particular artists are more popular in when it comes to the pirating activity. And sometimes that coincides with their sales activity and sometimes it doesn't. So that kind of information becomes very useful for those people who are trying to market and to sell those artists. One of the things that people use this kind of data for actually is to help them decide geographically where to plan tours, though. So one of the things that we're able to see very clearly is not just which countries an artist is popular in, but which cities they're within those countries their fans are. That sort of information is now being used quite widely by promoters and agents and band managers to book tours for their bands so they actually go and play in the cities where they know there are fans.
So even though they might have downloaded their music for free, they might well buy a ticket.
Exactly. And actually there's a lot of evidence to say that people who download things for free also spend a lot of money on music too. The UK regulator Ofcom recently published a report that showed that the average amount of money that an illegal downloader spends on music and digital entertainment generally is actually much higher than the amount that someone who doesn't download illegally. So these things are not as black and white as they might appear.
But how much money could the likes of Rihanna have lost in the fact that so many of her music singles have been downloaded illegally?
Well, I think it's not an exact science, this, because every free download does not represent a lost sale. Clearly, there are plenty of people who will never have bought them because they simply don't have the money. And on the other hand, there are plenty of people who, having downloaded it, have heard it and love it and then want to go out and buy it. Somewhere in between, there's a number that represents a lost sale. It's very hard to say what that is. I think overall, if you look at the industry as a whole, you might say that something like 25% of the turnover of the business, the equivalent of that is pirate, and that maybe some of that could be recaptured. But the reality is that although we see a lot of lobbying and we hear a lot of very vociferous arguments coming from the trade associations for the record companies, lobbying in governments and trying to persuade Parliament and different governments around the world to change the rules, actually the music companies themselves are getting on with it, and they find this information incredibly useful, and they look at the data, not just the data about file sharing, but actually all sorts of different kinds of data.
And that was Jeremy Silver, who's the chairman of Musicmetric. Now, listening to this is Jyoti Malhotra in Delhi and Lee Carter in Toronto. It's interesting, isn't it? It puts a completely different slant, really, on music piracy and how all this data can actually be so valuable to music executives. Lee, do you think it could kind of change the way that music piracy is viewed in general?
Well, I think it already has. I mean, I think for established artists, like your example was Rihanna or Lady Gaga or Beyonce and so forth, because they have the backing of the established large record labels, they will always get a certain amount of revenue that comes from buying legitimately purchased music. I mean, there's an estimated 900,000 customers for Beyonce's self-titled album, so I don't think she's doing too badly. Mm-hmm. Where it really hurts is for millions of struggling artists. Doesn't matter whether the music is streamed or downloaded for free, it's just not a revenue earner. And I think the reality for those artists for a long, long time is that the way to make money is touring. And you can tour and you can sell merchandise and you can sell CDs at your gigs, and you have to slog around and play a lot of venues, and you at least make some money off the ticket purchases.
And it certainly seems as though these illegal downloads, all this data that's being collected, can help those artists target the cities and the towns where they've got the most fans, illegal or otherwise. Jyoti, do you think that's a trend happening in India?
In India, it's the music industry is very, very different. First of all, it's not as evolved as the industry in the West, which means that while a lot of sort of well-known performers and singers do travel and tour around, but you don't have the attendant sort of merchandising and ticketing that come with it. First of all, most concerts are for free. And so, in a sense, I think people are making their money from sponsorships and elsewhere, and which also, brings me to point out that a lot of sort of young and aspiring musicians actually like their music. They would like their music to be downloaded illegally or legally. It doesn't really matter. They just want people to hear them. And so you have a lot of music on YouTube, which is for free, as you know. So it's very different from what you have in the West. But having said that, it's great to hear that music piracy has an upside, which means that I'm much more reassured that my daughters who download all the time, and I know that they don't pay 1 rupee, is I think the money is at least, some things are not so bad. So
absolutely. Okay, well, for the moment, do stay with us. We've got Cindy Sue back on the line from Taipei. Cindy, you got cut off earlier, and you were just about to tell me all about the economic prospects for Taiwan for 2014, or at least what people are hoping for.
Exactly. I mean, the past year, 2013, has been a very bad year for the island. The economy grew by only 1.7%. And as we're heading into the new year, the picture actually looks pretty bleak as well. It's because the fundamental problems Taiwan faces haven't been resolved. So even though we're seeing a global economic recovery, we're seeing Taiwan's other competitors like South Korea doing well in terms of exports to the US and Europe and China. Taiwan's exports haven't really risen very much, and that's because it's actually losing competitiveness in the face of more innovative rivals from South Korea and also cheaper products coming out of China.
And what's it going to do to try and attack its competitors and fight back?
Well, that's a really big issue the government and all the industries are facing, because it just needs a fundamental overall haul of the economy, a restructuring of the economy, because basically Taiwan's been relying on making products cheaply for many major brands like Apple and Dell and selling them all over the world. But that formula is not working as well anymore because the profit margins are squeezed, and there are cheaper manufacturers coming out of China and Vietnam. And so it needs to be more innovative now. It needs to compete with the big guys like Apple, Samsung. It needs to invest more in marketing, in R&D. It needs an overhaul of its economy. At the same time, it also has to encourage the private sector to invest more in the economy and not just move factories overseas as they've been doing in the past few years.
Cindy Sue, you've been talking about innovation, and just finally on the programme, I want to tell you about quite an innovative move. The US aviation regulators announced that 6 states will host sites for testing commercial use of drones of interest right across the world. The sites are part of a programme to develop safety and operational rules for drones. Now, they were, of course, mainly used by the military, but now the drones being explored by everyone from real estate agents to farmers or delivery services. Lee's still on the line. This has gone from science fiction to science fact, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, of course, for countries that have had first-hand experiences of drones as a military weapon, the idea of its peaceful uses may seem a bit far-fetched, but honestly, I don't see it as too long before they're actually quite commonplace in our skies, and it could be a boon for business. Amazon, for instance, have said that they're already using drones to collect and deliver some of their packages in their warehouses, and it's predicted that more than 70,000 jobs could develop in the United States over this. So,
it's incredible, isn't it? Because actually when Amazon suggested that, a lot of people said, oh, that's just a bit of publicity. That's never going to happen. Really? But it certainly seems as now with these commercial testings and so many states wanted to be part of it, it could really happen.
Yeah, they say that, or the FAA projects that some 7,500 commercial drones could be around within 5 years. I guess the way to look at them is what they are really, are little planes.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of commercial uses that you can think of for that.
Jyoti, can you see commercial uses for these little planes in India?
You know, drones have such a bad reputation in my part of the world, not in India, but in neighboring Pakistan, as you know, because they're used to sort of drop small bombs. But having said that, I would agree with Lee that the peaceful uses of drones are so far-fetched in my part of the world right now. But I think anything is welcome. And as you said, you know, when Amazon began to use drones, everybody said, listen, what the hell is going on? But yes, they are a reality. And I'm hoping in the new year, we will get some of that good news too.
OK, well, Jyoti Malhotra in Delhi and Lee Carter in Toronto, many thanks for being on Business Matters with me, Susanna Streeter. Goodbye.